Tony Schiavone is with Regal in the ring. He gets cut off almost immediately
2
by
words.
MJF.
He says the AEW and then yeah, 2 words.
Yeah. So MJF comes out and look, I don't know what people want me to say when I do these shows, when I write reviews, but the guy just, he doesn't hit home runs every time. He hits walk-off grand slams.
I was going to say walk-off grand slams that win the World Series. Yeah.
That's what he does every time.
And wins a World Series for a team that hasn't won a World Series in 100 years. He you know what I mean? Like he hits a walk-off grand slam Game 7 of the World Series to the Chicago Cubs to win their first World Series in a century is basically what he does every time. I
mean, I feel like I've said it before about his promos, but this may have been the greatest thing ever on Dynamite. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. This is what I said here. This is my exact words that I wrote here. I said, this is an all-time great promo. This is also a great litmus test. Anybody who has a problem with it is a dork and no longer worth your time. Anybody that doesn't like this promo doesn't understand wrestling. They don't like wrestling. They either like WWE, they either like Vince McMahon's vision of sports entertainment, or they just don't get it. Don't listen to them anymore, ever again.
I mean, this was just so good, and he explained, why he has beef with Regal, and he told this whole story about his WWE tryout when he was 19 years old. And look, most of this was just bullshit and embellished for the purposes of telling this pro wrestling story, and that's fine. But the emotion was real, and he really dug down deep into a place to convey that emotion, and this was just phenomenal. And then it was Regal's turn. Regal is smirking throughout all of this, by the way.
Well,
right?
Shit-eating grin on his face, and even MJF at one point goes, "Don't you smirk at me." you know what I'm going to say. Don't you fucking smirk at me. That's what he wanted to say, but yeah, it was.
And then we find out why, because then he gets his turn, and I was concerned because Regal has not been great on the mic in this company, and he's had some times where he's flat out shit the bed. And this was a very important promo at the top of the hour for a very important program that's expected to draw a pay-per-view, that's expected to be the money match on a pay-per-view, at Full Gear or whatever. And Regal really needed to nail this, and they didn't have to trust Regal with this. They could have just done Mox again, and waited till next week after it was clear that Mox was champion. You know what I mean? But they despite Regal's shaky performances, they trusted him, and he fired back, and Regal knocked it out of the park. This was vintage, William Regal. He nailed it, and they got the story over to perfection, and they even made sense of and did a callback to MJF knocking Tony Schiavone down, and Regal weaved that into the story, saying, "Hey, look, anyone who gets in the ring with me is fair game, but you put your hands on an announcer, like you're a loser." You know what I mean? Like that, you don't. So they even made sense of that, which we thought was just a throwaway thing, but ended up now being an important part of the story. Yeah. And then, of course, he does the thing where he turns his back and gives MJF the opportunity. MJF, once again, deeply conflicted, the same way that he was when he couldn't decide whether to shake Wheeler Utah's hand and all of that. And then, as we find out at the end of the show, where, he comes out with the chip and Regal's just got that fucking smirk on his face again. And MJF breaks and he says, "You know what? I want you at 110%. I'm not going to cash in this chip. I want to do this the right way." Because Regal broke him. And Rich, I know you have a lot to say. I want to, one more thing, and then you.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Of course.
So this is what I wrote last week about MJF after last week's, when I was still on the shelf with audio, but in my written review, this is what I wrote, and I quote, "MJF cut an incredible promo. When are they not incredible? Putting Stokely on notice for going into business for himself by sanctioning the attack on Wheeler Utah, and then having a full-on breakdown crisis of faith regarding his own feelings, thoughts, and actions. Some see this as teasing a face turn. I see this as MJF once again pulling the strings of fan emotions. Brilliant, fascinating, engaging stuff. I don't want to get too deep here. It is just pro wrestling after all. But this is an insecure man who hides his insecurities with over-the-top bravado, who deep down knows he's not what or who he wants to be. And the inner conflict is slowly tearing him apart. This is the bloodline, but for grown-ups. This all started with the Punk feud, and unfortunately will not play out as intended. But MJF is far too talented, creative, and driven to not make the best of the new path. End quote. And we saw that continued this week.
Yeah.
The essence of MJF is he's a deeply insecure person who knows he isn't who he wants to be. And he masks it with how rich he is and paying people to do his dirty work and taking shortcuts.
Right. And that's been that way from day one.
Said.
And that's been that way from day one in this company too. Again, for a company that doesn't tell any stories ever, from day one, the ring, like getting that diamond ring, getting the help of Wardlow, and then using that diamond ring in matches where he sometimes didn't even need to use it, but he just wanted to make sure that he won that match because, he the insecurity, like you said, and going out of the way and making sure that he uses that ring or knocks a guy out with that ring, or that was 2-3 years ago. We're talking about that story. And it's still playing out that he is a deeply, deeply, deeply insecure person. And that I'm with you. What I think you can do with this story too is a few different ways. I agree with you that that's where they're going. The story is not like people see this as like, oh, MJF is becoming a face. Like, I don't think that's the case. I not right now, at least. Now you could turn this into that if you really wanted to. If Tony Khan wakes up one day and goes, all right, no, MJF is just getting over too much. We got to go all the way with this thing. We got to turn him face. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. And I think I don't know that I would hate that all the way, but I don't think that that's what's happening right now. I think the idea is at the end of the day, this guy talks a big game. He talks big bravado. And that's why Regal was smirking the entire time, going like, all right, when do I get my chance to say, what you really are and who you really are and what you're really about and what you really mean and all this sort of stuff. You can tell me all these things. You can get mad at me. You can scream in my face. But I know deep down that you're still a coward. And that's what
and why I knew you weren't ready.
Right. And that's the turning the back. That was the thing later. That was all that. So that's just great storytelling, again, from a company that doesn't tell stories. But yeah, it's everything that people think that the Bray Wyatt thing is he's
no, it's everything that it's Roman Reigns done right.
That's too. Yeah, that too.
Because the bloodline story started out as this, where Roman was this super insecure guy who surrounded himself with, who manipulated his family to do his bidding, and knows damn well that Paul Heyman is just a hanger-on and a leech, but he knows that Paul Heyman can get things done for him. Paul Heyman always gets Roman out of his mess. But this is how the bloodline started. But now they've never advanced the story, because right now we're seeing MJF go through this crisis of faith and he's conflicted, and he's almost at the point where he's gonna break because he knows that that he's full of shit. He's starting to realize that himself. Roman, on the other hand, that shit has gotten over so well with their audience that they don't want to push that story forward, because Roman, as just this fucking manipulative asshole, they've gotten rid of the insecure part of Roman's character.
Now he's just a manipulative asshole that wins all the time, which is not as fun of a story.
Because it's the only thing over in the company, and they're just so that quickly became dull, repetitive, and boring. Whereas this is why I say this is and I know people are going to get mad at me, but that's why I say this is the bloodline for grown-ups, because this story actually advances, and we see MJF go through changes, and we see why. And if Punk was around and this was playing out as intended with Punk, I can't even imagine how great this shit would be. But, we've got Moxley as the stand-in, and you throw Regal in the mix, and they've pivoted very well. And it's, as I wrote last week, no matter what curve or roadblock that they face, MJF is way too talented and driven to not make all of this work. We're going to get to whatever the end game was supposed to be when we were supposed to get there, because this guy's too good for it not to happen. So I don't know. I thought this was fucking phenomenal. And I'll say this. He needs to lose at Full Gear. It's not time. And I'll stand firm on this opinion as well. I don't think this guy should ever win a title in AEW, at least not for many years. His story needs to be that he is not as good as he thinks he is, and he never truly gets the job done, and it eats away at his soul and destroys him from the inside out. If he wins the title, he wins. He was right. Right? You can't.
Right.
It can't be. It's way too soon for that.
Well, and especially now, what it's also way too soon too, is that because he had Wardlow, and then he ruined that relationship because he wanted to prove, I don't need you, I can do it without you. And he couldn't do it without Wardlow. And then that's when he added the Firm, and he added Stokely and all those guys.
Yes.
And now he's already saying, oh, I don't really need you guys, I can do it on my own. But deep down, he knows he can't. And that might be that's probably the best way to do that story is,
he has to lose.
Yeah, he's in the ring, he's battling Mox, and then all of a sudden, Stokely and the crew start coming down. And he sends him to the back or something, goes, no, I'm going to do it on my own. And then he loses. And then he eats, a death dealer or whatever. And that's how he loses. And that can just, because I think I'm with you. The money is in MJF, those internal struggles that he has. If he goes out there and just fucking wins, and there's a time to do it. I don't know if I disagree with you. He should never win a title. But I think that it
has to be a very long time.
Yes, he has to prove it to himself and to everybody that he can do it without anyone's help. And he hasn't done that yet.
At this point.
Right.
When he said, I want you at 110%, if he wins now, then the story's over. Right? Because now he's proving Regal and everybody else wrong, because now he has proven that he can do it. So he can't do it. If he does at some point win the title, it's got to be through paying somebody off or taking a shortcut or whatever, because at that point the story will be, and it's way too soon for the story to be over.
Yeah.
I would milk this shit for years. I wouldn't have him win any time. I'm talking any titles, and they've been careful not to have him win any titles. Okay? I wouldn't have him win any titles, because the essence of his character is this guy who tells you he's the best. You know what he is? He's sort of a modernized, more mature version of Bobby Heenan and his early days in WWF. Bobby the Brain Heenan, the smartest guy in the room, one step ahead of everyone, but how did Gorilla Monsoon always stick it to him? Bobby, your stable has never won a title.
Right.
You're a buffoon.
You say you're such a good manager, but your guys never win anything.
Right. Now, that was played more for comedy. That the MJF thing is certainly not, but that's the best analogy I can make. He should never win a title until he finally completes that inner transformation. And I would milk it but you know me, I'm Mr. I feel that way. I felt that way about Naito. I feel that way about Hangman currently. I don't think the second Hangman reign should come for years. I really don't, because that's the essence of his character too. He's got to overcome all the self-doubt and his relationship with the fans, to me, is one where you should dick tease them for years. Mm-hmm. Wait till the perfect time.
And he's the perfect guy to tell that story too, because
guy.
He's gonna have promo material, no matter what. That he can deliver that story and that he'll be fine with that story. So, and
that's why I said at the time that when his first title reign was not going to be his tentpole title reign. I said it while it was happening, and I say it now. That was just the one to establish him as a top guy. The real Hangman Page title reign, the one that he's going to hang his hat on when his career's over, the one that people are going to look back on, has not happened yet. And if it were up to me, would not happen for a number of years. Until the fans are on the brink of revolt. That's when you give it to them. Just what New Japan did with Naito. Perfect timing. That dick tease the year before where he fucked up and Okada beat him, that was brilliant. That's what you need to do with Hangman. And I think that's what you need to do with MJF as well. But anyway, it sounds like we both really love this.
Yeah. I thought it was. I wrote here that the promo had personality, passion, realism, anger, emotion, an all-timer, and it ended with a standing ovation. I mean, how many other promos end where the guy stops talking and the crowd just slowly rises to their feet and gives him a standing ovation? And that's what happened after that one. And then I said, if it just ended there, all-time great promo, all-time great segment. Then Regal gave it right back to him, and he was just as good. Saying like, "Oh, you think you had it hard? You didn't have it hard, sunshine." When I was working in carnivals when you weren't even born yet. Oh, you had to go train, and you were an extra. All right, yeah, I was fighting people legit in carnivals and shit. Like, oh my god, it was great. Yeah, and that's the best promos, and I think one of the reasons that Regal probably has struggled in a lot of his promos is that he's been trying to do, William Regal character promos, and this was just him. This was just be you. And MJF probably got that out of him too, of just saying, hey, just dig deep and be you. Be you, the wrestler. You tell your story, tell your career, tell your legacy, all that sort of stuff. You don't have to worry about advancing any. Just here's the basic story, then tell your story. And I think that is always the best pro wrestling story. And you felt it in Regal here. This is a promo that he felt passionate about. And there was so much realism in it that was great too. And yeah, same with MJF's promo, where maybe you embellish some of the facts here or there, but it was real enough to MJF, and I'm sure some of the facts were true. But this guy is just on another level, just a complete level.
Well, who are his best foils? It's the people that see through his bullshit. CM Punk, Regal, Mox.
Yeah,
they see through his bullshit. They don't take his bullshit, and they call him out, and it breaks him.
Well, and they made him relent too, because he has this ability, with this cash-in thing, that he can cash in anytime he wants. But they have now manipulated him to the point where he, instead of just cashing in whenever he wants, now he's, oh, you don't think I'm a tough guy? All right, well, I'll face you at Full Gear. It's like,
that's why he has to fail.
Exactly. He could have. Right, exactly.
As soon as he succeeds, he's a babyface.
Right.
And the story's over. I truly think that there's a timeline. If he never wants to be a face, if he wants to go down as the greatest pro wrestling heel in the history of the business, there is a timeline where he never wins the title.
Every time he's almost there, he turns again, and you're like, motherfucker, he did it again.
And the overarching story, the 20-year story of MJF is that he never wins the title. If he's truly never ever going to be a babyface, that's what you do. He never wins it. Because that's the essence of what he is. He's a fraud who can't even convince himself that he's not a fraud. That's the whole idea. So he should never win. Now, if at some point he's going to be a babyface, that's when he wins. So I do think there's a timeline where he shouldn't ever win it, or any title for that matter. So I don't know. This was great. And it's just this conversation, whether you agree with me, agree with Rich, don't agree with either one of us, it's shit like this is why I love wrestling, because this is worthy of my time and my thought, and the thoughts that I'm putting into it, and the back and forth that we're having. And, I wish there was more shit like this. These are the kind of conversations we used to have about Naito and Okada and, and I miss that. And, thankfully, with MJF, and, the thing about MJF is I think he knows and fully understands that, it's always going to come down to money, of course. But I think he also knows deep down that if he wants to tell this career-long story, this is the place to do it. Because the other place doesn't care. They go pay-per-view cycle to pay-per-view cycle. And I think he knows that deep down he'd be unhappy there, because they're not going to let him see out these sort of creative visions that he's able to see out here.
Or fully Tony trust Khan him to be the guy that does it. Because there's no doubt in my mind that MJF, this is all his, and I'm sure he bounces ideas off guys or whatever, or sits down with these guys, but this is his vision, and this is his idea of what this character is going to be and where it's going to go and all that sort of stuff. Because he's a brilliant pro wrestling mind. He's studied pro wrestling history. We know that. We know how much he dug down, and even when he was coming up, and we talked about that guy. When did we talk? I mean, 2014, 15, some of the early flagship days.
MJF?
Yeah,
like when he broke in, like 16, when he was Maxwell Jacob Feinstein.
Yes, and we were saying this guy gets it, and we knew people that knew him and said that, like, he is studying wrestling like nobody I've ever seen study wrestling.
He's the next megastar in pro wrestling. Right, we were told that super early, because the people that were working with him and training him, and they were like, oh, this guy he just fucking has it. And we've seen him evolve. I mean, he was kind of a lousy wrestler for a while, but again, and now he's like a legitimately good wrestler.
Oh, he's great, yeah.
And people evolve, and and get better, and he's he's become exactly what I thought he was going to become. You know, because all of the tools were there, everything was there, and most importantly, you know, the drive is there. The drive is there. I think if Tony Khan just continues to make sure that he's happy financially, I don't think he'll ever leave this company. And I think we have a chance to see one of the great, 20-year stories in wrestling, play out over time with him. I really believe that.
Absolutely. But yeah. My final thought is this again, like I said at the top, like if it's a great litmus test, this promo. Anybody who has complaints about it or hand-wringing or pissing their pants about any mentions of WWE or whatever are probably not people worth your time because they just don't get it. They just don't understand what pro wrestling is. And honestly, I can't trust you if you tell me that you didn't like this or that this wasn't good because we are just watching different things. We look for different things in wrestling because this is my kind of shit right here. We just got done talking 45 fucking minutes about it. You know what I mean? Like, this is so clearly, obviously my type of shit. And if it's not your type of shit, well, I don't know. Then we're just watching a different genre then, I guess. So it's not even a prefer different things because this is fucking great. Like, I don't understand how you can watch this and not think this is great. How is this not what you want out of your wrestling? This passion that he's bringing, I don't know. I don't get it.
He has to keep planting those seeds that his childhood dream was WWE because he's telling the War of 24 story. So he can't stop bringing that up.
Well, and even then, like, okay, I want a guy to tell his real story. I think that's one of the best things you can do in wrestling is tell your real story. It wasn't anywhere else to go in 2015. It wasn't going to Impact, you know? So, yeah, of course his dream was to go to WWE. When he was going up in the wrestling world, there wasn't any other fucking company. And that's kind of the story, too, is that he got so good and became so good that now this is my company. And he said, this is my company. You got fired, and now you're in my company.
And he's a heel, and the biggest heel in the company is WWE.
Right, yeah. So I get it twofold. Like, the real story is, yeah, of course he wanted to work for WWE because there's nowhere else to work, and they didn't want him for a multitude of reasons, and it angers him and it annoys him, and it put the chip on his shoulder, and he still has that chip on his shoulder about it, and even though he's the top guy in this company, because again, like you said, it's the heel thing of, well, why are you not happy here? You're the top guy in this company. Well, part of him probably still has that chip on his shoulder, even if he's never going to fully see it through or whatever. So yeah, it's awesome stuff.